Hi, before we get started, I just want to first apologize for the background noise that you will be hearing throughout the video. I did not realize that my microphone was going to be that loud, and I kept having to switch between OBS, Discord, and my notes. Secondly, we did have some issues with Color Thief's audio and video desyncing as well as the quality reducing. Again, I would like to apologize for that. That is out of our control. I'll make sure that for our next interviews that this won't happen. And yeah, we'll just make sure that things are a little smoother from now on. I know this was my first interview, so there were some mishaps. Finally, this interview is one of many that I will be conducting with TGM players as part of a larger project that I am doing, where I will be covering the entire history of Tetris the Grandmaster. Thank you, and let's get straight into the interview.
I'm Color Thief. I'm just like a long-standing member of the Western Tetris the Grandmaster community. Been a part of it since it's existed, pretty much. So Stratus wants to pick my brain on some history stuff, and I don't know what any of the questions are, but I'm curious, and we'll have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah. All right. Again, like you mentioned, you've been part of the TGM community for like a really long time. How
hmm
was the TGM scene back in the day, like back in the early 2000s?
Early 2000s. Okay, that's like when I first found out about it, and it basically did not exist at all in English. And finding out about the game in those days was like a weird process for a variety of reasons. Lots of staples of the internet today didn't really properly exist back then. YouTube certainly didn't exist. Wikipedia, I think, maybe existed, but uh, it wasn't nearly fleshed out enough to be like properly existing. Um, but yeah, basically there was nobody. So like the early days was a bunch of individual people just kind of trying to find each other, find people who liked the game and could talk about it. So the earliest days was basically people finding each other on a forum for the emulator that first supported TGM1, which was what was it called? Zinc, Zinc for you Americans. Um, but Zinc supported TGM1, and there's no particular reason why like game players would use the forum. It was more like for emulation developers to kind of like talk about things, or maybe users to report issues. Not so much for people playing the games to talk to each other, but it was the closest we had to like a central point. So the super earliest days was like a Tetris thread on the Zinc Emuversal forum, and then uh, as soon as it became obvious that a few of us were like with the game to stay, then it moved to like IRC.
Who were some of the people that you met on the Zinc forums?
So there would be some names that most people don't remember because they haven't really been a part of the community for a long time, but they would have been maybe part of the community for years in the early days. Like the earliest people I met on the Zinc forum would include the player known as Jago. And so we definitely connected there. I believe there was like a German player named Shade. Um, but there were others, lots of whom I'm sure I've forgotten their names. There was a player named Lost. There was a player named uh, well, Amnesia was on there for sure. He was one of the last people I think to kind of be introduced to us through the Universal boards. So the early like pipeline, I guess, into the TGM community is the only web presence was perhaps the Zinc Universal boards. But shortly after we connected there was an IRC channel on QuakeNet, hashtag Eureka, to talk about the game. So we largely moved there, and for the longest time, it was literally just like two or three of us idling in IRC 24/7, and then just talking about, I don't know, nerding out about the game, linking weird Japanese pages that we found that might have information. And like literally no information was in English in those days. and that impacted a whole bunch of different aspects of the game. Not just understanding like how does the game work and what are the codes and but even stuff like figuring out what joystick to use. Like there were no resources in English about Sanwa versus Saimitsu, and then four-way versus eight-way, and how to switch to four-way and that kind of stuff. There's probably like 100 YouTube videos for that these days, but in those days there was like nothing. Um, I have a shameful memory when I first got my Sanwa joystick of knowing that it should be possible to turn it into a four-way stick, and then almost like you get like those logic puzzles where you have to like get the stupid metal ring off the whatever thing. It's like, okay, I know I can turn it into four-way. I don't know mechanically how it's supposed to work, and I have to figure out how to do it without breaking the plastic. So it probably took me like over an hour to just sort of like figure it out on my own and change it to four-way.
Right. So, going back a little bit, you mentioned Jago or Jigo. I don't know how to say
Hmm.
it properly.
He's
Um,
definitely one of the OGs. He had been playing slightly longer than I had. I'm pretty sure when I met him, he would have been one of the first on Universal.
as far as I'm aware, he was the first person to get TGM1 GM. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, you can never know that kind of thing 100%. Maybe somebody did it privately, but uh, when you care about uh, a niche hobby like that, it's only natural to want to connect to other people who enjoy it. So if anyone else was first, they certainly didn't really make an effort to connect with other people. So as far as we know, it was him. And I think in the history channel of the Discord, I've posted like some transcripts of some emails we used to exchange. Like that's how jank the early community was, that we would actually email each other little updates and kind of catch up like ye olden times. Um, can't remember the last time I've written an email to actually catch up with someone. But yeah, he's the first one to get a GM. I think I beat him to a clear, and I could clear the game somewhat consistently, but I didn't even know the point of the game was to go fast, and I didn't know about a time requirement for GM. So I had like mega slow S9s. I can't even remember how slow, but I wasn't in a hurry at all. So I was like milking the lock delay reset and stuff, uh, just so that I could think even harder about where I wanted to place pieces.
Wow. So, I know you mentioned like resource and whatnot. How they were a little scarce. I guess which resources were there, if there were any?
The closest we got to resources tended to be like Japanese GeoCities pages and that kind of thing. So you just transcribed the word Tetris the Grandmaster into Japanese and did a Google search and just prayed that something in the first 20 pages of search results might be interesting. I mean, that's how the internet kind of worked before search got better and resources got better and that kind of thing. And we would discover new resources and then let other people know, and link each other to it and that kind of thing. Machine translation was absolutely terrible in those days. So if if there weren't a lot of pictures that kind of obviously communicated the intent of what it was trying to teach, then we were pretty much out of luck in terms of understanding it. But there are a lot of resources were like that. And then one of the first English resources that probably still exists in mostly unchanged form, I aggregated a bunch of TGM1 details, and like there's some like MAME cheat file, not cheat file, what is it? Info.dat, I think they used to call it. And you could put information on there, and it was like publicly editable, kind of like a wiki. So I kind of consolidated like what are the codes, what does it take to get Grandmaster, and I think just package up the little super mini intro into the info.dat so that new players would at least have something to look at. It's hugely obsolete by like the wiki that we have today and all the other resources, but that's what we did.
So, I have two questions. From SPC, didn't you have multiple TG1 clears before learning about level stops?
Yeah, that's right. That kind of blew my mind. Going back through those old emails, Jago even taught me about level stop, and I had clears already, and I didn't know level stop was a thing. I mean, I had no reason to care about level stop because I wasn't playing for speed or anything. Um, I definitely clued in that the background only changes when you clear a line, and I always thought that was like a nice little dramatic touch that they added to the game. But I didn't know the levels were stopped as well.
All right. And then Eric has a question as well. Did any of you learn Japanese for these resources, or did any of you already know them? Already know
So I
Japanese.
definitely didn't know Japanese. A few people do. Like it's not that uncommon among people who like Japanese culture things to take on learning the language, but it's a pretty serious commitment to get any sort of proficiency in it, right? So I never even tried. I'm passingly familiar with super basic features of the language, but that's about it. Jago learned. Uh, I don't know if he's actually fluent. He did live in Japan for a while, so he's got to have at least something going on in terms of knowing Japanese. But the only time I remember getting him to translate something, it was like he really had to think for a long time and maybe look some stuff up. Like it wasn't anywhere near fluency.
JBroms also has a question. Did one of you two pick up on the fact that the demo GM is man locking?
We definitely paid a lot of attention to those demos because they demo some very interesting techniques. They even have like the auto synchros where you have to like charge DAS before you rotate to kind of sneak it into a little crevice. Um, so I don't remember noticing whether it man locked or not, but we definitely picked up on other aspects to the demo.
All
And
right.
I think we would have discovered the attract mode bug too. If you mash rotation buttons while it's reading the input for the demo, for some reason it reads them both on the same frames, and you can basically make the demo misdrop and then top out.
Wow. I guess after this early age, how did the game become popular?
Ooh, it was a very, very slow transition to popularity. Like I said, for the first year or two, there was probably at most like five of us idling in IRC or something like that, and some people would drop in every once in a while, but more than five would have been crazy. Um, Things started to pick up. Not related to any sort of game release, because I guess in the early days, right, like that the beginnings of the Western community, if you put that in the timeline of the series, this would be a few years after TGM2 had come out and before TGM3 had come out, and there wasn't any particular catalyst for people to kind of come together as a community. But a major like social factor that kind of let it continue to slowly snowball was the Tetris concept forum that Caffeine put together. And when it started out, it was like a personal blog of his, and he just kind of added a forum to it. And there weren't a lot of Tetris resources online, period. So being Tetris nerds, I think I was the first one to discover the website, and I had been reading the blog entries since before the forum was added. And then in the early days, there was a forum and a wiki, and I think I might have registered as like member number two after Caffeine or something like that.
Wow.
And and then I contributed a lot to the forum and to the wiki and stuff. And that's when the volume of information that was kind of out there on the public that really could get picked up by search engines and that thing really started to take form. So I'm assuming a lot of people in the like slightly less early days of the community uh, just found it through Tetris concept. Like they might have discovered it some other way, but they found a community at Tetris concept. It continued to exist in parallel with the IRC channel for a large number of years, though.
Right. So I guess going into that Tetris concept era, Specifically the year 2008. This was the year that you got your first Death GM. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, if you looked up the date, I'll believe that. It's been some time ago, and I don't celebrate the anniversary or anything like that. But yeah, that was certainly a trip. It happened right before a Carnival of Death as well, and I really wanted like a recurring theme. Lots of newer players won't feel this way because when you join an established community, there's maybe less pressure to do it. But like I said, I was very active on the forum and in the wiki and stuff to get things going. So as one of the early people, I always saw, it's your job to like leave a trail for other people to follow and have an easier time to get into this hobby you like. So when I was the first Western person that we know of to get Death Grandmaster, I think I had this thread uh, during the Carnival of Death where I broke down like every few pieces. If there was like a semi-interesting move for me to talk about, there was like a picture of the board state and then like a little paragraph of me discussing, what were my considerations in choosing to make a certain placement. And that was cool. I've had a lot of feedback on that guide over the years. It's it's buried in an old forum these days, so not too many people still read it, I don't think. But I got comments even from Japanese players. They found it like quite useful to reference to like capture, um, the key heuristics or whatever that Grandmaster player levels are using. Uh, and yeah,
Eric has a question. When did you guys find Tetris Japan Finals? And did you already know about TGM2 at the time?
that was my introduction to TGM2. And it was my introduction to a lot of things. I wasn't even really into arcade games in those days, and now I'm quite into arcade games. So for me, it was a gateway into like games of skill, especially with randomness and stuff involved that just kind of stay fresh over a long period of time. Uh, so I was exposed to Tetris Japan Finals in my first year of college when I was actively seeking out super plays for different games, and Tetris was one of them. And then, yeah, I Googled a lot. I found okay, here's the developer Erika, and they had it's not called Tetris Japan Finals on their website. I don't know if they host it anymore, but it wasn't called Tetris Japan Finals on their website. That's just kind of how it went viral. And even going viral in those days is weird, right? Like going viral with a video when you don't have YouTube is like how. Uh,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people found it through like eBombs World or whatever. I found it literally file sharing with Kazaa on my university network. So
Wow.
it's like super freaking random, right? And I remember that, like, you're a spoiled kid at that age. You're used to every NES or SNES or Genesis or whatever game you're into. You're used to it being available by certain means for play for free, and it was an interesting experience, like searching for it and not really getting any results and not even really understanding like what would even emulate such a game if it were to be emulated. And so that got me down the whole like arcade rabbit hole, you know, understanding what arcade culture was, how it was released, where it might show up, were it to be emulated, and that kind of thing.
So yeah, JBroms has a question. How did you acquire a TGM2 PCB?
I mean, these days, anyone who wants to buy something from Japan can easily just use a proxy service that will handle it all for them. Those did not exist back in the days I acquired a TGM2 PCB. So I literally needed a personal connection to someone who visited a PCB shop in Japan and purchased it for me and then, mailed it. So, like, it sounds insane in retrospect, but I literally got like a money order that I like mailed to a person I didn't even know very well who just said they could buy it for me, sort of. So And not small amounts of money either. Like people complain that these games are getting expensive, but the price they go for now is similar to the price they were going for around the time I bought it, which I think was perhaps shortly after TGM3 was released. So what is that, like 2005,
Yeah.
2006, like sometime around there. And so I picked it up around that time, and it was going for over $1,000 easily at that time. Like like I think more like closer to 2,000. I don't know. I had an old book I opened up recently, and my bookmark was the receipt I used for the money order purchase to buy the game. So that was weird that I still had that kicking around. Uh, but I could verify the price I paid technically.
Yeah. So, yeah, you own like a PCB of TGM2. Do you also own TGM1?
Yep, I've got TGM1, TGM2, TGM3. Trying to think. TGM2 was my first arcade PCB, and I built my own super gun to be able to play it and everything. Um, and then I had that for a number of years. And I think my second purchase would have been a new Astro City arcade cabinet, which was mega worth it. Mega worth it. Setting up the whole super gun, like it takes up a lot of table space. You have the circuit board sitting out in the open and stuff. I don't know. It's kind of annoying to set up, and you almost didn't want to leave it set up either. So it just added all this friction to playing the game. But if you have the game just sitting in a cab, you like flick a light switch effectively, and the cab is turned on and ready to go. So I started playing a lot more when I got the new Astro City cab. It's just so much more convenient. And then after I got the cab, my next purchase would have been TGM3. And then much later, I picked up TGM1.
So, I guess coming from someone that owns all three games, what were your thoughts on clone games and TGM fan games?
Clone games, I mean, they're an essential part of the culture, right? The reality is that more people play these games than can own circuit boards, and um, more people play these games than exist arcades near people, which they could even hypothetically play the games in. So it's a bit of a tricky situation legally or whatever. Um, but I don't know. It's a weird relationship that these things have with each other, right? Like in some sense, clone games have been the best advertisement that the real games could have hoped for, because nobody would have paid attention to this series for longer than, a YouTube video if they couldn't actually try it for themselves.
Right.
So in a sense, I certainly wouldn't have gotten into the games if I didn't have ways of trying before buying, and I certainly did not visit my local arcade to play it. So I don't know. I see it as a necessary part of the culture. If we had proper ports, then that might be a different question. But um, I don't know. It's this tension, right? Because it's not entirely legal what people are doing sometimes with the clone games. But I don't know. It is what it is. It's a situation. I don't think anybody's happy with it. I'm sure the players would rather play authentic games. I'm sure Erika would love to sell them to people.
Can you explain the clone prohibition that happened on Tetris Concept? I believe you were around for
Oh
that.
boy. Yeah. So that was something. That was very divisive in the community. So this would be in the context of hoping that a TGM4 can get released. And even though this is ancient history in terms of the community, TGM4 is still not released. So in some ways, this is old and crusty drama. In other ways, it's like, hot damn, like we're still kind of living in that world. Um, but this would be an era when Discord hadn't caught on yet. Forums were still very popular. IRC was still reasonably popular as well, and there was a relatively thriving community of at least 100 or so players in the Western world. 100 like maybe active people, regularly active, and who knows how many that are a little more casual about it. But you can imagine, even though the most hardcore among us were serious and buying arcade hardware and playing as authentically as we could, lots of people, their only way of playing was clones. Especially students don't have much money. What do you expect them to do? Though I was a student and my parents aren't wealthy or anything, and I still irresponsibly poured thousands of dollars in arcade stuff. But nevertheless, the clone prohibition was it was started by Mihara, basically saying like, look, I'm having problems uh, with the rights holders, like the Tetris company or publishers or something like that, and basically. The way the logic went was if clones are readily available, then who would ever play the real game, and therefore the game should not be funded if it's just easy to play it for free. Like basically, it was a piracy kind of argument saying, this game isn't even worth releasing in a high piracy climate, and that uh, there would need to be some sort of crackdown on clones, some purge of them to make financial sense to release TGM4. So at the time, somehow we were able to like herd cats in the sense that we got some sort of consensus to basically get rid of clones. I'm sure they still existed, in the shadows of the community, uh, but there was strong social pressure, discouraging people from playing clones or admitting they were playing clones or whatever, and just trying to clean up the community and make it feel more legitimate or whatever. And I'm not sure how long that lasted exactly. Um, not a short period of time, but I don't think it was years. It was maybe just months. And then eventually it became clear that TGM4 was not going to be released, and that people were living in the closet, as it were, and were tired of that. And there was a bit of an outburst in the community, and then the prohibition was not just ended, but like unceremoniously ended with lots of heated arguments, both within the community and even with Mihara himself. So I don't know. There was lots of shade cast, but yeah, I personally I was quite upset with the community at the time because I didn't think it was asking a whole lot to have people like live in the closet a little bit to uh, with respect to clones, and just to try to justify the game's release. It probably would not have even made a difference in hindsight, but at the time I was really upset that people were basically signaling that they didn't care if a new game was going to come out. They'd rather just play with their clones right now. So I don't know. Mental health wise, I'm a relatively stable person, but I was not in a great place following that whole ordeal. I wasn't able to sit down with the game and just enjoy it. So for me, the end of the prohibition was basically the end of my ability to even enjoy the game because of all the community drama. So that's when I pretty much quit the community, like cold turkey entirely, and didn't come back for over a decade.
So you came back 2020?
I came back 20, yeah, like maybe November 2020, I want to say. So it's been like just over a year at this point.
Wow. So then, kind of going back to, I guess, around that same era, then, TGM4 had its first, I guess, location test. And how much, like, footage did you see of it? Like, what was.
TGM4?
Yeah.
I mean, I was a nerd on the internet into a niche community. I saw every video that got posted advertising it or whatever. So the first location test in Japan in whenever that was, it 20. Well, you probably know the dates of this better than me because I haven't written out the timeline.
Yeah.
Uh, but the first wave of attempting to release TGM4 when Sega was going to be the publisher, I would have seen whatever videos were released. I would have seen translations of 2CH people in Japan like writing excitedly about the game and its features and stuff like that. And uh, I don't know. I consumed all of it. Um, but then Sega ended up not publishing the game, right? So
Yeah.
there was a second wave of location tests quite a number of years later. I want to say 2016
It
or
was 2015.
2015.
It was 2015.
Yeah, it was shortly after the big AGDQ uh, for the TGM presentation at AGDQ in 2015. And for that one, I was really lucky. The location test was like kind of in the greater Los Angeles area, and I have a good friend in that area, and I, visit that friend periodically. So I made a trip to visit my friend during that location test. I stayed with my friend for a couple weeks, but for the weekend of the location test, and he's into TGM as well, so uh, we were able to go to a round one arcade and just pump credits all day long into the TGM4 location test machine. So I was able to get hands on with it. The only playable modes were rounds mode, like the successor to Shirase, and the what's the big one called again? Konoha mode, where you have big pieces minus the S and the Z pieces, and you have to get all clears over and over again. So that was really fun. I got to experience it firsthand. It was a little buggy. Uh, maybe it's not super well known, but well, because each game is like faster than the one before and kind of introduces new features for player convenience to try to take the game to the next level. The closest that TGM4 was getting to that was repurposing the third button to being this like weird like speed button that had context sensitive uses. So if you were like if you were soft dropping a piece but were holding button C, it would actually hard drop instead, even under ARS, I think. And it would like instantly charge DAS or something like that if you were in active time and pressing left and right. Um, I say this like kind of hypothetically because for the location test at round one, it was busted. It wasn't working right. I remember like it was weird. Like it might have even like changed rotation to being world style rotation or something like when you pressed it in classic mode, which is just weird. Um, but yeah, it was an interesting idea. It sounded like it needed more play testing to like polish it or whatever, but that was a cool thing about it that they were going for.
I guess what were your thoughts about TGM 2015, and then also like comparing it, I guess, to TGM 4 back in 2009?
The 2009 version. I mean, they looked very, very much the same. Like they would have reused a lot of assets and maybe just updated the engine slightly. Uh, the level of detail that was released in 2009, I'm not sure that there's anything that's obviously different from 2015. It was just a second attempt to get publisher interest to release the game. But I enjoyed it a lot. I thought the art direction was fantastic. They had really nice color design in all the backgrounds, and they were animated in a cool way. Um, and I don't know, it looked like it was going to be a really solid experience. There there's always been a little bit of salt in the community over the fact that TGM3 is currently the pinnacle of the series, but that there's quite a bit of input lag in TGM3. So even if you're a big fan of the series, a big fan of the direction it went in TGM3, and love to play it, it's like the actual authentic game isn't even like a great way to play it. It's like the rule set is nice, but like the extra lag is a bit frustrating and not good to deal with. So the great hope was that TGM4 might be, even at worst, it might have been like a slightly better TGM3. but just running on more powerful hardware and not lagging. Um, so that was the hope. Of
Right.
course, Shinji Hosue makes excellent music, and I don't think any music was ever made for TGM4 until they secured that publishing deal. But it would always be exciting to anticipate a new Shinji Hosue soundtrack. I think what a lot of people don't get is that it's inspired by a different arcade game named Cleopatra Fortune, and in that game you can get all clears, and then you get to see the cute Egyptian anime girl, Patraco, do various poses, and in later stages even do like cosplays and stuff. So it's absolutely just Eureka continuing that tradition, but with like their weird characters. I don't remember much about how they looked like. I remember like a sexy anime girl like serving hamburgers as one of the backgrounds. Like they were kind of weirdly specific, but I don't know. Maybe Eureka knows their market.
Yeah. So I guess around the same time, same year as the TGM 2015 was HEDQ as well. This
Hmm.
was the first appearance of Tetris the Grandmaster. So, and you were there as well, right?
I was, yeah. Um, so this is still in the middle of me like having left the community. I can't even remember exactly how I got involved, considering the red tape and all the planning or whatever around the GDQ events. It was surprisingly casual. It's like somebody just asked me, can you come? Can you bring TGM3 or whatever? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then I just kind of showed up. I didn't, I put zero effort into it other than attending the event basically. And because it was in the middle of my hiatus, I hadn't even practiced at all. Super, super disrespectful considering how incredible the GDQ series is. Um, I no, I did practice some, but my total practice might have been like 5 hours or something over the week before the event or something like that. It was good enough to do some hype moments. I cleared doubles first try with Kitaru, and that was hype. So for the small contributions that were supposed to be coming from me, I think I did all right. The overall event was actually unbelievably incredible because the even among the most consistent of players, it's not marathon safe. At best, it's like a 50-50 that you'll be able to pull off a demonstration that really shows the game at its best. Clearing Shirase, clearing an invisible role, getting a Grandmaster grade, and stuff like that. So we were really able to knock it out of the park in terms of all the stuff we demoed. And a lot of people didn't even realize Kitaru's secret grade, like
Yeah.
that is especially like RNG dependent. So you could be the most skilled secret grade player in the world, and I don't know what the success rate would be, but it might only be like 5% or something.
Yeah.
But I think it only took him one try, right? Like he got up there and he cranked out a secret gem, and like I don't know, we put on a really good show. Everything went our way that could have gone our way. So it was pretty fantastic.
Yeah. And uh, this is kind of unrelated from, but did you like go like was that your first time in that area by any chance? Like,
What do you mean by area? Are you speaking
so
the abstract sense of demoing the game, or do you mean like where AGDQ is located and
yeah, where
traveling to the
AGDQ
United
is.
States?
Yeah, where AGDQ is located.
It was my first GDQ event. I had been in the area for MagFest before. That's not like too far away,
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's not completely alien to me.
All right.
Um, but if in the more abstract sense for demoing the game, before GDQ, there was an event for a massively underrated YouTube channel. I think they're called STG Weekly, and they also have instead of just STGs like shooting game shmups, they also demo random games sometimes that are in the uh, same general niche of arcade style gameplay. and they call that sub-series like Awesome Game Replays. I think they have a playlist on their channel with all of those. And we demoed TGM there, and that was really cool. For one, the guy who hosted us in LA to do all that, he had the PCBs and the cab himself. So like we just showed up and played. It was quite a bit simpler, and it was a lot of the same TGM 2015 crew that were there to do that. I was there, Kitaru was there, uh, uh, Kevin DDR was there, and Aperture Grills was there as well. And I don't know, we demoed everything. I did a one shot, one kill in death mode, which feels good. Because like I said, like I was not playing the game in general during that period. So the few times I would play were events like that, and I don't know. It felt good knowing I still had what it took with so little effort to crank out a death gem. But I think Kitaru got the invisible as well. Like I don't know. We had a lot of success in that early run, and I think that was perhaps included as our proof of concept to the GDQ event organizers that we did have something that we could demo that would be impressive to see and enjoyable for the audience. Because in those days, like GDQ has flexed a little bit on this, but in the early days, right, it was very strictly like speed runs, speed run, speed run, speed run. And if your game is about score attack, or if it's not purely speed run, like TGM has grades in it and stuff like that, then it was a less clear fit for the event. And they've opened that up now to like all of gaming culture that's interesting to demo. And there's if your game is cool, there's probably some place for it in there somewhere. But in those days, it was a little bit pioneering to move in that direction. And the Awesome Game Replays episode helped us get our foot in the door.
Speaking of meetups, you attended Strasbourg. I think that's how you say it. Or...
That's right. I mean, it's in France, so I guess it would be Strasbourg.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I went to Strasbourg for the meetup, which is cool. That used to be where the player Jago lives. So he'd be somebody that I had been corresponding with for a very large number of years at that point, and it was really cool to get the opportunity to see him finally. Put a face to the name. Oh, apparently he still lives in Strasbourg. So the more you know. Thanks for doxing him, Muff. Um, but I don't know. It was a cool event. It's the sort of thing only a bunch of young, crazy, Tetris obsessed people could do because his living quarters at that time were like an attic apartment in like an old building. I suppose most of them are old buildings in that city, but um, it's basically a one bedroom apartment. So like the kitchen, the shower, the everything else is just one room, uh, which is nuts. And then there was a toilet across the hall, but it was not very large at all. So every night we had to like pack up literally everything, fold away the whatever, put the table in the corner against the wall, lay mattresses on the floor, and then there was like just enough surface area in the floor for us to all just like sleep in sleeping bags in the floor of this one bedroom apartment. And like no bed or anything to speak of, just like sleeping on mattresses, like foam mats on the floor. Um, but absolutely crazy, right? You think you get, I forget how many of us there were there, but Amnesia was there. I was there. Jago was there. Petit Prince was there. I think Amnesia brought one of his friends. There was a player who I haven't seen in the community for ages called Teratang that was there. MFM, who most people don't know personally, but he's a player who was famous for stacking his Tetris well on the left side of the board, and he was also famous for trying to play TGM1 for score attack instead of fast jam grades. And so people know him for his MFM challenge, which is the TGM1 score attack. He was there. Cool guy. He was really into Twinkle Star Sprites as well. I'm trying to think if there were other people. That's most of them.
Yes, Card Captor Sakura Tetris. Um how did that become popular? And like I guess was like on your radar.
I don't think that ever was super popular in the community. I went out of my way to like import a copy for PS1 and give it a shot just because it was a Rika and it was a Tetris game and I needed to see what was there. And I don't know, I put a decent amount of time into it, grinding out time attack records. It's a little like weird as a concept, as a high level game. Um, you like you do individual level time attack and it it actually is an intentional inbuilt feature of the game. You can save whatever seed you got for your record, and then you can try to replay that seed. So you keep the main strat is to like re-roll the piece sequence over and over and over until you get like the ideal sequence you're hoping for to beat the level really quickly. And then once you've grinded that seed, you just play it over and over and over until you grind out the frame perfect execution or, close enough execution. So I don't know. It's a really funny game to take seriously. I grinded it a little bit, but it's not that fun compared to the real games. The multiplayer in it is completely wild. Like I think there's a character where their attack has like a 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 or whatever chance of just giving you nega field, which is one of the most broken OP items in any versus Tetris ever. So I don't think they were going for balance per se with Cardcaptor Sakura Tetris. I think they just wanted to entertain people, and if you take it too seriously, you'll probably go crazy or something. Like it's not meant to be taken that seriously.
I guess let's talk about and I know a lot of these a lot of the questions that I'm asking are during your break. So
Mm-hmm.
like you left in 2010 and came back in 2020. Is that correct?
I mean, I think it was roughly 12-ish years. Uh,
So I guess we can start with 2011 when Kevin DDR got World Rule Grandmaster in TGM3. Uh,
mm,
were you around
okay.
for that? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, to a lot of people in the community now, especially those who came after GDQ 2015, like Kevin is old guard, right? Like he's the pro, the pillar of the community. To me, he was some kid.
Wow.
He's the new guy, and in some ways, I guess he'll always be just because he came into the game after me. But he's done some fantastic stuff with the game. He's definitely not a kid, even if he'll always be just some kid to me. Um, I think about how far he's come. I actually visited Seattle. I did a trip there where I did touristy things with my girlfriend, and we did a whole bunch of stuff. But I carved out a bit of time to catch up with Kevin as part of that trip. So I got to know him a bit then, but that would have almost been the last time I saw him like in real life, and he was literally a high school student at that time, right? So if he feels like a little kid to me, it's because when I think of Kevin, I mostly think back to high school student Kevin. That's the Kevin in my head. Um, I saw him a little bit at GDQ and whatnot as well, right? So that'd be quite a number of years later that I finally saw him then. But yeah, the so-called new wave of players in my head, the people who like joined us after Tetris DS was released, after Tetris concept forums existed, that includes players like Kevin DDR and Kitaru. And I mean, what they did is pretty incredible. I think at the time, there were very few people who played World Rules like or SRS, but also like shared TGM like values. So it was a weird place for the community where you have a bunch of ARS players, like Eureka rotation system players, who loved the game, and you had a large number of SRS players, but they kind of liked completely different stuff. They really like to grind 40 lines and play their own style of verses that's like T-spin centric, and there's nothing wrong with that stuff. But it's very much two different communities, and I think the amazing accomplishment of getting World Rule GM didn't find as large an audience as it deserved because there wasn't that middle ground of people who really truly appreciated both rule sets and philosophies or whatever for what they were worth.
Right.
Uh, and even myself at that time, I probably, it was impressive, but I wouldn't have cared that much. The answer probably would have been, okay, now do it in classic rules.
Yeah.
which, which, to be fair, took quite a number of additional years before he could do it. So they are definitely not equivalent achievements, even if they're both really incredible achievements.
Right.
Uh,
And so I guess skipping to that, Kevin getting classic GM, I guess, what were your thoughts on that then? I also asked that.
I was super happy that like the community had finally grown up, right? Like in some sense, uh, I think Mihara himself, like Senpai, finally noticed us, as it were. Um, he he thought of the Western community as just a bunch of like clone developers, like a bunch of delinquents, leeches on the back of his great series. I'm putting words in his mouth here. I'm probably who knows to what extent I am correct or incorrect. But unlike a bunch of filthy foreigners who are good for nothing other than pirating his game, we had a clear example of the best that he could have hoped for anybody to approach his game, right? Like anybody who gets Grandmaster in TGM3, uh, it's undeniable. It's a hard feat. It commands respect even from Mihara himself. So I think it's a moment where the community really did mature and become recognized as a valid part of the broader TGM community, really a bridging of Japan and the rest of the world, and not just thinking of this as separate communities that have, but acknowledging that there is a worldwide market for TGM. The West can take it just as seriously as the East can, and that uh, I don't know. I think that, especially in combination with the 2015 GDQ presentation, really changed the perception on the Japanese side of things of what the Western community was about. So I'm really grateful for that. It was a great moment.
Right. So I guess you're also kind of saying that those two events kind of blew the game up as well to the.
Yeah, not only did it command extra respect from Mihara, right, but it's obviously a very very exciting news that spread, went a little bit viral, and attracted a lot of people to the game, right? It's the best kind of advertising you could hope for, right? A bunch of really exciting news headlines of players reaching crazy heights in a video game that you had perhaps previously dismissed as just a gentle time waster. So uh, it was incredible. Like especially following GDQ specifically, if my generation was introduced by Tetris Japan Finals and then went down the nerd hunt of tracking down the game and practicing it, there's a much larger generation with a much larger reach of GDQ discovering the game through GDQ 2015 and the saga of Kevin pursuing, Shirase S13 and classic GM, and that has persisted to this day. Like we have never shrunk. It's been great.
Right. So, I guess then on the topic of GDQ, GDQ SGDQ 2016, what were your thoughts on that? I'm just kind of asking. Like, at this point, I'm just
Oh,
asking about.
2016. So I mean, I was still a bit outside the community at that stage, right? So it's still in my off years, and I didn't contribute to that GDQ, so I wasn't a part of it. I might have seen the VOD afterwards, uh, but but perhaps not. Did that one have Eon? Am I remembering correctly? If
Yeah,
Eon was part of the
Enchantress
demonstration?
of
Yeah, yeah,
Enchantress of
yeah,
Numbers. Yeah, yeah, Eon was there.
yeah. So I guess I did see it, and it was cool. In some ways, I think uh, like I have no complaints about it. I think it was a great showcase, but it's really really hard to live up to the hype of 20 TGM 2015 for two reasons. I mean, the first time you experience something, that reveal is never going to happen a second time. You can't really reproduce that, no matter what. Um, it's true about the Matrix movies. It's true about doing a TGM showcase.
Yeah.
Uh, and um, Also, we got extremely lucky that first year, and no matter how good of a job we do, it's just really hard to match like the natural 20s that we rolled one after the other in that first showcase. So I mean, it was great. It didn't have the same like giant jump in popularity afterwards. I think it maybe reached a similar audience and then had a good punch to it, but not quite the same punch. But we continued to see just like regular healthy growth of the community at that point.
Right. So I guess between I guess so you're kind of saying that EGDQ 2015, SGDQ 2015 as well, and 2016 all kind of
Mhm.
skyrocketed the growth of the TGM community. I guess.
Yeah, like when you look at the numbers, which for our community, the best pulse to get on that would perhaps be the annual Carnival of Death and what the death toll was. You can kind of see the number of players growing and basically like doubling or more in popularity over that time period, which is which is crazy growth, right? Like it took us over a decade to reach 100 active players, and then we more than doubled kind of overnight as a result of the GDQ events.
All right. So then I guess let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Mm,
SGDQ 2017.
okay. What happened in SGDQ 2017?
Oh, you weren't aware of that? So, as far as I am aware, as far as I remember, there was a
Oh, the
huge,
setup.
yeah, the setup debacle.
I mean, even 2015 had crazy setup issues, right? So I'm not super familiar with what happened in 2017 specifically. I know it's quite notorious about what went wrong, but the fact is that every TGM game runs on completely different hardware. It's not a drop-in capture feed like the way GDQ consoles are, where you know they've captured a million PlayStation or N64 or whatever console games, and as business as usual, they can set it up in 5 minutes. So it's a bit of a nightmare, and arcade hardware in general is a nightmare. This stuff can like break in some ways and maybe need ad hoc maintenance and stuff. And I forget the technical details of what happened, but I think people had to get quite creative and think on their heads and figure out a technical solution. And it's actually impressive that they got it working as fast as they did. Uh, I don't know if I'm incorrect about this, but I think some stuff might have even had to be soldered specifically for the event at the last minute in a panic. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but I think I remember hearing stuff like that.
Right. Actually, I think that's not a bad idea. I don't know if, sorry, this might be a, I might derail this a little bit. I do want to talk about
Mm,
SGDQ 2017. So, JBroms, if you want to unmute and talk about that, and
mm.
maybe like anyone else that was there as well, because I know that was um, kind of, I guess it's kind of important to TGM history.
Yeah, I can talk about it.
Yeah, and if you want to turn on your camera, you don't have to. Okay,
Yeah, no camera.
that's all.
All right. So basically, what happened was this was the first GDQ where they were going to use, I believe, OSSCs and a specific type of capture card with it. So because they were using the OSSC, they told us that we could use SCART for video, which is fine. But what they didn't tell us is that for all of the consoles that they were capturing with SCART, which is a type of RGB for a really nice picture, they had actually had like custom split off audio cables. And SCART, the actual connector, carries audio through it, which is how we had our audio set up wired, because that's what we expected to see. So when we got there, and Cool Maddie, the normal director of everything, was actually up in his hotel room with a fever at the time. So we went to go set up, and we realized, like, oh, we don't have the right audio connections. The super guns that we had, the only thing that we thought we might be able to get some audio out of was actually an amplified mono audio port. So we went back and forth with GDQ. It was mostly just us sitting there and letting them try to figure out if there was any way to get it. And eventually they said, okay, screw it. We're just going to run this no audio, which they probably should have done, 10 minutes into this and not an hour into this. And one of the super guns was built differently than the others and had its own like line out jacks. So they were able to use audio from that, which is what actually made it onto the stream. So that was the TGM1 part of it. That's the hour-long setup debacle. And then when we went to set up TGM3, this, nobody knows why this one happened, because this still doesn't make sense to this day. TGM3, the real hardware, outputs a 480p 59.94 NTSC, like straight up totally normal signal.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, the capture card wouldn't capture it. We tried to feed it through the OSSC and double it. Nothing worked. And eventually the stream PC blue screened.
Oh god.
SPC has a picture of that from the audience somewhere. He was in the audience that day. Fun fact.
Oh yeah,
and
I see the 4 pictures.
Yeah, so after that happened, we finally got everything back up, and then Kevin had to play Shirase and stuff after that, and the runs didn't necessarily go all that well. I remember I was happy because the only thing I was in was TGM1, and I was super focused on just getting a GM. But otherwise, basically, what people remembered from that wasn't any of the gameplay at all. It was entirely how long it took to set up and the fact that it delayed the marathon.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you for, I guess, clarifying on that.
No problem.
All right, so I guess we can get back to Color Thief. So, I guess let's jump ahead a little bit to, I guess, some questions about you and your experience, I guess, with Tetris the Grandmaster. So you got TGM or Tap Master GM last year?
Yes, that's correct.
So was this because of the break that you did? Like the fact that it was because your Death GM was 2008, Master GM was now. Or sorry, well,
yeah. So you can like I basically didn't try at all in the intervening time to get Master GM. And when I started in late 2020 to stream the game, I just got back in practice some more. And then a natural thing to do would be to try for Tap Master GM. And part of the reason it was late, and this highlights something, I guess, at least a little bit interesting between the old guard and the newer guard of players, newer generations. In the old days, like the spectacle of playing invisible was such an intimidating thing that it was really easy to fool yourself into thinking this is something that only like special geniuses can figure out, people who are gifted in some way, and that you could never achieve the same thing. And I don't know, in hindsight, it's kind of ridiculous to think that kind of thing, because playing Tetris at a high level at all also has similar vibes to it. But there was just something about the invisible that was particularly resilient for having this kind of attitude. I think in the community today, we see this attitude live on in perhaps Amnesia and nobody else.
yeah.
But by 2020, when I returned to the community and saw all the progress that had been made, it was clear that there was a very large number of players who had overcome the invisible challenge. And it was very, very clear that, anybody who cared to take on the challenge and put in some work, it was learnable. It didn't require special superhuman anything. All it took was a bit of focused practice. So that combined with derusting, like it was obviously for me like one of the weakest records that I cared about in my scorecard or whatever of personal bests. So it was obvious that I should finally properly break the ice on the challenge and learn Invisible. And once the mental shift had happened, it only took me about 6 weeks of practice before I got a GM. And it wasn't like I don't have the free time I used to have, not by a long shot. So 6 weeks of practice with a normal adult life and full-time job, and perhaps on average practicing an hour a day. Um, so I don't know. It's learnable. I was able to break that mental barrier thanks to all the generations of players that came after me, and finally get a grandmaster grade.
Right, and so I guess we can talk about the new generation of players. I guess what made these guys different from like your kind of generation of players?
I That's a good question for them. What made them bold enough to think that they could just grind at something and achieve it? Um, that's a great question. I think to a certain extent, the more people who break the ice on it, the more people who aren't afraid to try their own luck. So if I had to guess, I'd say particularly maybe Kitaru and Kevin DDR breaking the ice on it uh, really did break mental barriers. If you grew up in the community in a way when zero players had conquered the challenge, that's one thing. But Jago as well got GM. I shouldn't shortchange Jago's accomplishments. But if you grow up in a community where uh, of all the impossible challenges you're trying to put yourself up to, a dozen people have survived it and overcome it. Like it doesn't stand out. It doesn't look as special as it once did. It might look about as intimidating as Death Grandmaster the first time you play Death mode. You know, so I think there was a bit of a perspective shift.
Right.
Eric's asking if he can unmute, so
Yeah,
he'd be a very strong and somewhat recent generation of players. So that I'd love to hear what he has to say.
So what I can say about I feel that it's kind of like, when Joseph Saley won CTWC 2018, that inspired a whole new wave of players. Although I'm not really sure what that new wave would be. I kind of feel that just seeing other people do Invis, that pushed me to do it. So yeah, I suppose people like Kevin broke the ice.
Yeah, and I guess coming from someone who is, I guess, part of the new generation, although not as skilled as the rest, I know definitely having the resources and I guess a bigger community compared to the early generations, I think definitely helps a lot.
I don't know how long this interview will be shared around, but at least as of 2022, when it's being conducted, I will say, as an old guard looking at the community now, one of the biggest holes that I see is that there's not really been much of an effort to be as helpful as you could in helping new players learn Invisible and overcome that challenge. Um, this is me as a boomer talking, saying these dang kids, they don't even want to write help guides to help the next generation do better. But no, to be less cranky about it, no, I do think there is a very very large community need for this sort of thing, and I hope somebody steps up to the challenge to try to write that kind of guide. It's hard. It requires a lot of introspection. You have to dissect your own thought processes, try to figure out why you can even beat it yourself. For a lot of us, we just kind of vibe with the game, we don't necessarily even know why we're as good as we are, and can't even put into words how other people can become as good as we are. But there are patterns to all of this. There are tricks to overcome these challenges, and it would be cool to see some of these new players who are so strong and at Invisible, share some of their insights.
Right. Yeah, that would definitely, yeah, again, like I'm planning to put this up on YouTube, and so I guess this can be a call to action to any TGM players who have mastered Invisible. I guess, you could totally make like a guide or something for that. All right. So, I guess let's talk about TGM3. Are you planning to conquer TGM3 GM anytime soon?
Oof. I mean, that's a complicated question. I don't want to dunk on TGM3 too hard because it is a fine game, but the extra leg it has over the other games is like a bit frustrating at times to deal with, especially for those playing on original hardware, which is all of us, of course. But the few times I've taken it out recently, I feel like such an old man playing that game. The faster pace is overwhelming, and I feel like I can only properly take it on when I'm very well rested. So it feels less compatible with my busy adult lifestyle. I don't know when I could properly attack it and hope to actually make progress. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it would make sense if I got better at Invisible to go for Master Mode GM. Shirase S13. I already have S12. Going from S12 to S13, it seems like it's half the challenge of Shirase. Like, it's just as hard as getting to S12 in the first place. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I don't know. It seems like everybody who gets S13, like, kind of a little bit bullshits their way to S13. It's not like a super consistent thing that anybody does. So the best players are obviously more consistent than the rest of us. But I don't know. I have a bit of a mental block with Shirase S13. I'm not super eager to take on that challenge. I'd say and TGM3, I did put a lot of time into it back in the day. So even the lesser played modes like Sakura and Easy, I have some respectable records in. I'm not sure. I might still have the community record for Sakura mode.
I can check. I did see that. Yeah, you did clear. You did get Sakura. But
strangely, one of the things that might draw me back to TGM3 is the crazy theory crafting I've done over the years on easy mode. Like, I don't know why that particular mode fascinated me. I just really wanted to understand how it worked. So I really labbed it really hard, theory crafted some crazy strats, and I do see some meaty potentials to dethrone the world record in a dramatic fashion. So if I did go back to the game, I think that would definitely be a big part of my rotation. I would be more excited about grinding out a world-class score in easy mode than I would be an S13 clear.
right, and so just an update. Manu has the world record for Sakura Classic, and
heck yeah,
yeah, and Amnesia has Easy Classic world record, and then after that is MHL, and then you go. So I guess this could be some motivation for you to try and get first. I mean,
yeah, oh yeah, and yeah, I'm aware of the easy players as well.
Western
like
record,
I've created like resources to learn how to play the game and to describe like the formations that are worth big points that you want to try to go for and stuff. Amnesia in particular was a bit thick-headed and could not understand my resources very well independently and needed me to hold his hand to get him to play the mode more intelligently. So I'm very much aware that he's first place, and he needed my help to get there a lot.
All right, so I guess there are some questions here. Esquatre.
I'll pick one out. He's asking if I can talk about Amnesia for the next 5 hours.
Yeah,
please.
I was gonna mention.
I'll say a little bit about Amnesia. A lot of people. He's a little bit the joke of the community.
Yeah.
But and there might be drama or like dramatic rivalries and stuff with Amnesia. But I'd like to go on record saying I like the guy. We talk to each other semi-regularly. No matter what happens in public, in private, we are buddies. And he's even visited me in Canada before, and I've hosted him, and we played a bunch together in real life. So I've seen him in Strasbourg. He's visited me in Canada, and we've just been talking a long time. So we're friends. Anytime you see anything that might suggest otherwise, we're just playing it up for fun.
Right, and I believe you and Amnesia had a doubles world record at some point in teaching in tap. I could be wrong.
I don't know. We maybe the Western record.
Yeah,
The
Western
world record was Japanese for a very long time, and then eventually dethroned by Kevin DDR and Aperture Grills.
Yeah.
But I've been close to the previous world record. I forget the exact time difference, like 20 seconds or something away from it. But that would be with my friend Dhack Ed, who's another Canadian player who lives not too far from me.
Yeah, he's in the call too as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
But
Oh, it's Kevin and Con right now, not
Oh,
Kevin and Aperture Girls.
Ooh.
Sorry, I think Kevin and Aperture Girls had it at some point, but then Kevin and Con took it over.
All right, so I guess we're close to wrapping this up. Where do you think the TGM series is heading?
Oh, did I freeze?
Yeah,
You guys
yours
see me?
is.
My
It's loading.
camera seems frozen. Let me turn it off and on again. I think the USB flake.
It is. There you go. It works.
We're good. Where is the series going to go? I mean, we're all hoping that it will be more widely released. As much as it's grown in the West, the larger perspective of the game is very much that it's a dying game. It hasn't gotten a new game in the series in a long time. The games that have been released are arcade releases, not consumer releases. They're prohibitively expensive. They're getting more expensive. They're breaking. They're getting rarer. It's just increasingly difficult to like break into the game as a hobby, and very difficult to recommend to people. So we're all hoping that there's ports or a sequel or something that will become available to players. So uh, that's the great hope for the community. Honestly, I'm not sure how much new stuff it needs. Like the existing games are pretty great on their own. I'd love to see TGM4 come out, but I'm not even convinced that it would be like that far beyond TGM3. It's like a lot of things in life, you might think of it as like this exponential curve that's going to shoot out to infinity, but things are more like an S curve, you know? And if I had to describe the series' potential that it might live up to, I think it's past the inflection point of the S curve, and any future releases are just going to have diminishing returns from here in terms of innovations and fun surprises and that kind of thing. So I think we're well served by the history of games that already exists. I just think the community deserves some home console releases that are widely acceptable, or perhaps a Steam release or something. We can all dream. Just getting the game out there, getting it affordable and easily accessible. I think we might see a third giant wave of generations of players coming and joining us and taking it to the next level. It'd be great.
Yeah. Which Palace Corner asks, favorite color to steal?
Green. No further questions.
All right.
No,
yeah. I believe this was touched on, but there is an easy mode stall strategy. Stall strat.
Yeah. So that idea came to me while I was inactive playing the game, but I thought of it, and then a light bulb went off, and I was like, "Oh my god, this like supersedes a lot of the theory crafting I'd previously done." So the concept behind it is you take advantage of the game's so-called kill screen or kill timer. So after a certain amount of time elapses, the game cranks up the play speed really, really, really high, and it's there just to kick people off the machine, so that even if you have some slow granny playing Tetris, we don't want them hogging the machine more than however many minutes it goes for. I think it changes from game to game. It might be 12 minutes or something in TGM3. But by cranking the game speed up, if they were that slow to begin with, then normally they would certainly be incapable of handling the super high speed that the kill screen comes up with. Oh, Signfuse confirming it's 15 minutes for easy mode or for TGM3. So another thing is that a big part of the points of a game of easy come from the credit roll, and specifically, there's this formation that I identified as being really, really lucrative. It's worth about 100 Hanabi, the score units of the mode. And that's where you get a single followed by a T double, a spin T double. And if you pull that off and you've got the right multiplier going into the roll and all that stuff, then it's worth like 100 Hanabi all on its own. And the credit roll lasts a fixed amount of time, and maybe you can pull off this single T double trick like 5 times, 6 times, or something if you're playing well. And the whole idea of combining these two things are you've got a fixed amount of time in the roll, but if the game were somehow faster, if you could say drop twice as many pieces, then your 5 or 6 T doubles comes up to 10 to 12 T doubles. It's a pretty healthy boost to your score. So the concept is that you kind of want to time things, stall so much in the early game that you kind of hit the end of easy mode to enter the credit roll right around the 15-minute mark, so that the kill speed kicks in. And then the credit roll you can play at like warp speed and just get omega points. It's much easier said than done, and it's not so overwhelmingly broken that you could get a world record without playing the first 200 levels very, very well as well. So it would be quite the meme record to kind of pull together a solid first 200 levels, perfectly timing the kill speed, going into the roll, and then like blazing through it at super high speed, getting those T doubles. I don't know. It'd be a sight to behold, but it could definitely get a new world record in Classic Easy.
Right, and I guess also talking about your break, did you have any other like theories or improvements? Because I know you didn't play as much, but still, like, was there anything that you might have improved on or just thought of?
I mean, I played other games for the most part when I played games. I got big into Lode Runner, into Catherine, probably other stuff that's slipping my mind too. Oh, Judgment Silver Sword. And I took all of those seriously and was able to get some world records in them. So for the most part, Tetris just was very infrequently on my mind. So occasionally I would think about that. The closest I would have to having special insights is maybe too much of a technical digression for this interview format, but I really love nerding out about randomizers and randomness and stuff like that. So even if I wasn't playing Tetris, as a side hobby that's independent of Tetris, I like nerding out about randomizers and the math behind it, statistics and probability and theoretical computer science and all the interconnection of that into randomizer theory, stochastic automata and all that. So I definitely got deeper insights in all of that stuff and continued to study it, but it's more of an academic exercise and less of something of practical use for playing Tetris. It maybe makes me more opinionated about what would an ideal Tetris randomizer be, what would it look like for TGM4 if it were designed by a mathematically sophisticated person, but with all the same design goals that Erika is clearly demonstrating in the first 3 games. So I've got lots of opinions about that stuff, but it's kind of technical for a general audience.
Right. So again, about your break, when you came back, I guess. Well, first of all, what like inspired you to come back?
I mean, it's gonna sound ridiculous, but a friend of mine was complaining that oh, I just can't capture analog video from my arcade machine. It's too hard. You can't get it to work, or blah, 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 blah. And I wanted to prove them wrong. I had all the stuff I needed. I had an OSSC. I had, what's the capture card called? Some capture card that worked well enough with it. DataPath E1S, I think, is my capture card. I'm like, I've got all this stuff. I could just do it and show them, like, it's not that hard. Just suck it up and make it work, because it's not insurmountable. So my motivation was just literally making fun of my friend, or showing them that they were wrong. That got me off my ass to actually set up that gear on my arcade machines for the first time. And then once I had it all set up, and the timing of that is, of course, well into the first year of the pandemic. And then it was just natural to like being like, okay, you know what? There is a bit of a void in my life, less social activity than usual. I'm gonna pick up TGM again and see what happens. So those two things kind of came together and brought me back to the game. But the community is great. Once I had broken the ice on coming back to the community, it's hard to leave again. You guys are good folks.
All right. We have a question from Esquatre. Is the stream that you did about randomizer stuff still up?
Yes, it is. I might clean it up someday and put it on YouTube, but for now, it is a Twitch highlight. So the VOD is out there.
Thoughts on the event of 1 year and 2 days ago?
Super epic. I was asked earlier about getting Tap GM, and that was a very epic moment when it happened, not just because of the accomplishments itself, which in any context is very, very epic, but 3 of us in the community got our first Tap GM on the first day.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
We're lucky if we get 3 new Tap GMs in a year, let alone 3 on one day. So it was messed up. Like, none of us expected this. In the morning, Europe is a bit ahead of us, and there was a, I believe, Swedish player by the name of Flinkman who came out with the news that he had just got GM. And then Switch Palace Corner was able to pull one off on his lunch break. And without going into personal details, like my work life is very busy, especially during this particular period. But I'm like, I'm not going to give up hope. I'll have a nap after work, and then I'll try to do it. And I was a little bit groggy after my nap, and I sat down to try it anyways, but I pretty much cranked one out anyways, and nobody was expecting it, but we managed to get 3 new GMs in one day. It was super epic. Super epic. Let's make it happen again.
Yeah.
3 more.
Carnival of Death, but it's like Master GM.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're good to wrap this up. This interview has been around like 1 hour 30 minutes, so I think that's a lot.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with your school project. Feel free to reach out to me if you get some more questions coming up. It's been great talking to you guys. Thanks for all the questions.
Yeah, and thank you for letting me host this. So yeah.